Part 4. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 32. Driving the car, I sent Susu back to school. In fact, Subai didn't want to drive around in his car. The bronze box in his car would be charged with smuggling cultural relics if found out. Judging from the reaction of the old man and the cap, this thing was definitely of great importance. But it was late at night, and there was no way to take a taxi in my place. As for Susu, as the saying goes, business cannot be done without justice, and it was embarrassing to say that it was embarrassing for a girl to be there alone at night. Of course, now it was because Subai was not hungry. The blood of the old martial arts practitioner was of very good quality. After Subai drank it, the feeling of being full has not completely disappeared. After the car stopped, Subai didn't say anything. Susu didn't get out of the car in a hurry, but looked at Subai. "Since I met you, I haven't." Subai raised his hand. "There's no need to explain, you know." Susu nodded, with some tears in her eyes, but she still got out of the car and said to Subai, "Goodbye, treasure." Subai responded lightly, "Same for you." When Susu turned around and walked towards the school gate, Subai also started the car again and left here. He couldn't take this bronze box with him to the plane, so he had to find someone to check it in. Moreover, this is also considered a contraband. It is impossible to find a courier company. You can only choose acquaintances. Subai remembered that he did have an acquaintance in the city. I drove directly to the door of a courier company. This was a Shunfeng courier company, but inside, it was also responsible for some shady business. For example, some contraband, even, drugs, and even arms. Of course, the portion won't be huge, and the price is high. Subai stopped the car outside it and walked directly in. The layout of the store was no different from a normal express delivery store. When a delivery boy saw Subai coming, he immediately asked, "Send it by courier? Documents or things?" Subai shook his head and said, "Look for Brother Ninth." When he heard that he was looking for Brother Nine, the courier boy winked inside, and a female courier immediately walked into the inner door. Soon, she came out and nodded to the courier boy. "Please." Subai nodded and walked in. The inner door was actually a door behind the store. This row of stores were built on the periphery of a community. Brother Ninth must have bought the apartment behind the store. Then I directly connected with my store. It was a bit dark inside, but after turning a corner and opening the door, it became bright. Inside was a layout similar to a study room. A middle-aged man with a scar on his face was sitting on the coffee table eating rice. Pig ears, pork head meat, plus a bottle of white wine. The man can eat it deliciously by himself. "Brother Ninth." Subai stood at the door and shouted. The man who was eating and watching TV was suddenly startled when he heard this voice, then immediately stood up and looked out the door. "Abai, it's you." Brother Ju seemed very happy, but also a little restrained. He wiped his hands on himself, then pushed out the chair behind him. Sit down quickly, haha, it's rare that you can still think of me." Subai didn't sit down, but stood to one side. Brother Ninth was unhappy and said directly, "Just think of me as a pity for Brother Ninth, and let Brother Ninth see what your father looked like when he was sitting in the first seat, okay?" Ninth brother said so. Subai didn't say anything and sat down directly. Ninth brother smiled hee, took out a cigarette, lit it himself, and then squatted down in front of Subai. "Abai, I want to see your ninth brother for anything. I have something that I want to ask you to transport to Chengdu." Subai directly explained the purpose of his visit, but in his memory, that rainy night emerged. He stood at the door of his house and looked at Brother Ninth, who was covered in rain and covered in blood, kneeling there. That night was also the night when something happened to his parents. Brother Ninth, his father's bodyguard, came back, but his parents didn't come back alive. Sure, give me the detailed address. Brother Ninth, I will personally help you transport it. I agreed directly without asking what it was. Thank you, Brother Nine. Come on, don't say thank you to me. I can't afford it. The person I'm most sorry for in my life is you, kid. My parents' affairs really have nothing to do with you, Ninth brother. Okay, it's Brother Ninth, I'm being hypocritical. It's rare that I can see you during the Chinese New Year. Have you had dinner? Can you have 2 drinks with Brother Ninth tonight? Sudbai thought about it. He had a plane ticket tomorrow night and was going to trade blood plasma tomorrow afternoon. It was really convenient to temporarily stay at Juji's place for a day. He immediately picked up the wine bottle and filled Juji with wine first. Then pour it on yourself. Brother Ninth picked up the wine glass, smashed it in his mouth, and then put the glass down. No, bring your things in first, and I'll pack them up, otherwise you'll get drunk and get in trouble. Good. Sudbai went around the car, drove in from the gate of the community and drove to the ground floor of Brother Ju's house. Brother Ju asked Sudbai to drive the car into his garage, and then pulled down the rolling shutter door. The lights were on and it was very bright inside. When Brother Ju saw the bronze box, he just silently picked up some plastic boards and packed it without showing any special meaning. After the packing was completed, Brother Ju took Sudbai back to the previous room, and the two sat down to drink together. While drinking, Brother Ju suddenly asked, Abai, if you are interested in this cultural relic, why don't you call your family? You know, I don't want to bother them. Yeah, that's right. Hee, that's good. It's better to ask Brother Ninth to prove that you don't treat Brother Ninth as an outsider. That night, Sudbai slept at Brother Ju's house. The weather was very hot now. After laying a mat on the bed, he could lie down and sleep. This night, Sudbai slept very peacefully without dreaming. When he woke up, the whole person felt refreshed. I looked down at the time, it was already 9 o'clock in the morning. Get up and walk to the bathroom. A new toothbrush, mouthwash cup, and towel are all ready. After Sudbai finished washing, he walked out of here. When a courier boy in the store saw Sudbai coming out, he immediately came over and said, Brother Ninth went to deliver the goods early in the morning. Sudbai nodded. Ninth brother was very concerned about his things. Of course, Sudbai also trusted Ninth brother's character. At least, he was wholeheartedly devoted to himself. After simply eating something in the snack bar outside, Sudbai received a text message on his phone. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, go to the tea house at the west entrance of the park on Zancha Road. After Sudbai read the text message, he put the phone away silently. If you go to Chengdu by yourself, blood plasma is a must, and you happen to have connections here to get it. It is much more convenient than waiting until you are in Chengdu to find blood if something happens to you and you are hungry. After eating, Sudbai sat down at the entrance of the express store. He took his mobile phone and checked the official account. He found that several more messages had been posted in the official account, all of which were group messages and were intended for all listeners. In the live broadcast and screen flow of several stories, some people died, tragically, but some people survived. Especially when Sudbai saw a picture at the bottom of an article. In the picture, a man was shirtless, and behind him were the remains of zombie flesh and blood. The man's face and body had been blurred. In fact, all the characters in the graphic messages here have been blurred. Only in the graphic messages of the story missions Sudbai has experienced, he can see clear images of himself and others. This should be treated differently and kept confidential from others. After looking at the pictures and texts, Sudbai suddenly felt that the two story worlds he had experienced were probably child's play in front of some people. However, when thinking about the many perverted listeners created by horror broadcasts in this world, Sudbai had a very absurd feeling. What is the purpose of this horror broadcast? Is it really just to make the audience experience the horror firsthand? And then create a bunch of perverts? Abnormal mentality, abnormal ability. Is it so boring? After looking at the time, he felt that it was almost time. Sudbai was about to drive to that place. The car was parked outside Juji's garage. Sudbai got in the car and put on his seat belt. However, just when Sudbai was about to start the car, it suddenly turned violently. Turning his head, there was a cat sitting on his back seat, a black cat. The black cat just sat quietly, its amber-like cat eyes staring at Sudbai calmly. One person and one cat were looking at each other, but cold sweat was already dripping from Sudbai's forehead. Sudbai felt a feeling of suffocation, and his whole body seemed to be on the verge of collapse. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 33. Sudbai bit the tip of his tongue and leaned back. If it hadn't been for the seat belt, Sudbai might have fallen into the driving position. The black cat picked up its paws and began to lick it with its tongue and take care of its hair. It seemed that it didn't take Sudbai seriously. However, only Sudbai understood that just now, when he and the black cat looked at each other, his mind the pictures produced in the film are a river of sticks. Countless resentful souls in the river of sticks are roaring, and screaming. This is a shocking and despairing picture. An ordinary person, even someone like Sudbai, when a person with this kind of psychological endurance suddenly sees these pictures, his whole mind will lose control in an instant. What kind of cat is this? Sudbai tried his best to calm down his emotions. At this time, Sudbai's cell phone rang, but Sudbai didn't care. However, Sudbai didn't care. The black cat jumped over with a meow and came to the passenger seat, stretching out its furry claws. He touched Sudbai's cell phone, which was placed under the gear groove in the middle of the car seat. Many thoughts appeared in Sudbai's mind, whether to take out his dagger and kill the cat, or to just open the car door and run away. However, after seeing the black cat's actions, Sudbai still took a deep breath. Take a breath and pick up the phone. There is a friend request on WeChat. And this application prompt is very strange. Friend request from public account, Kongbu66. When did WeChat launch this feature? Add friends directly from the official account channel? The other person's avatar is a black cat. Sudbai was stunned for a moment. He clicked on the other person's avatar and looked at the big picture. Then he raised his head and looked at the black cat currently sitting in his passenger seat, combing its hair. This WeChat account avatar was the black cat in front of him. Could it be that this black cat is using WeChat to add its friends? Sudbai licked his lips. It was impossible. The black cat was obviously licking its paws, and it didn't have a mobile phone on its paws. When he was stunned, Sudbai clicked in agreement. The other party's WeChat name is Dark Lychee. Not long after adding a WeChat friend, the other party sent a voice message. Sudbai paid attention to the black cat and clicked on the voice message. Hello, help me bring good luck back to Chengdu, thank you. Auspicious. What is auspiciousness? Is this black cat called Jixiang? Sudbai really couldn't equate the word auspicious with the terrifying picture that the black cat in front of him had just brought to his mind. Does this have anything to do with cats and good fortune? Who are you? Sudbai replied with a voice. You have no qualifications about who I am. I just want you to bring Jixiang back to Chengdu. Didn't you just buy a plane ticket to Chengdu? You are on your way. The other party's tone was very stiff, but you could clearly hear that it was a woman's voice, with an unmistakable. Is it this cat? Of course, take it back to Chengdu by plane. Sudbai didn't ask again, what if I don't bring it, or what's the benefit if I bring it? He didn't continue to ask about the other person's identity, but just replied. Good. Dark Lychee immediately responded with a smiling expression, reserved and reserved. Putting the mobile phone where it was, The black cat seemed to have already taken care of its hair, and then just sat there, looking out the window, looking very calm and relaxed. That person can add himself through the public account of terror broadcast. Can that person know that he is about to return to Chengdu? Who is that person? Although there were many doubts in his mind, one thing was clear to Subai. No matter how many doubts he still had to do something. Can he get on the plane with this cat? Forget it, forget about it for now, let's go trade the plasma first. Anyway, the other party will wait for me to ask for the cat after I arrive in Chengdu, and I will know who the other party is. After starting the car, Subai drove calmly and arrived at the agreed place in the park 40 minutes earlier than expected. Subai got out of the car. At this time, before Subai closed the car door, the black cat also jumped out of the car, its tail raised and yawning, as if it was tired from the car ride. Subai watched for a while and saw that the black cat really had no intention of running around, so he let it continue outside. After all, this was not an ordinary cat, not the kind of husky that was thrown away. Subai walked into the park, and the black cat followed behind. However, when Subai was about to enter the agreed cafe, the black cat suddenly meowed, then walked up to Subai and pressed its two front paws on Subai's feet. "What's wrong?" Subai asked. After asking this question, Subai felt a little funny that he was actually talking to this cat, but soon, the cat proved with facts that it really understood human speech. The black cat scratched Subai's trouser leg with its claws, and then walked to the tree-lined path on the other side, signaling Subai to follow him. "Anyway, it's still early, so let's go, and have a look. The park is not big, but it has many secluded paths. These winding tree-lined paths are actually quite long." Subai followed the black cat for 5 minutes and saw the park management office hidden among the green trees. It was a house painted in green, and the design principle was to minimize the damage to the green beauty of the park. Ahem. At this time, a man coughed inside, and then the window was opened. A man stuck his head out and spat outside. "Lijun, you're coughing again." A woman handed a glass of water to the coughing man. "It's an old habit, haha." A man and a woman, the man coughs and the woman hands him water, nothing special, but what if the man and the woman are both wearing police uniforms? There are police here. Moreover, there were not just 2 policemen inside, but many more. At this time, Subai didn't understand that it was a bit insulting to his own intelligence. The guy who was going to provide him with goods was caught. The police were trying to catch a big fish in a long-term way. At this time, the male policeman also noticed Subai in front of him and stared at him carefully. Subai knelt down, stretched out his hand, and placed it on the black cat's head. Meow. The black cat leaned comfortably against Subai's palm and rubbed it actively. Very cooperative. Really cooperative. "Jixiang, let's go, let's walk for a while and then go home," Subai said to the black cat. The black cat stretched lazily, and then took the initiative to walk forward. Subai followed the cat and continued walking forward. The male policeman looked at it and then lowered his head to drink water. Walking to the edge of the pond in the park, Subai sat down on the bench. Black cat sat next to Subai with a cold expression. "Thank you, Jixiang." The black cat didn't respond anymore. It was no longer the same as when he took the initiative to beg for sex from Subai and pretended to be a pet. Plasma cannot be traded, otherwise it will bring a lot of trouble to herself. Subai is not willing to trouble his family anymore because of his own affairs. After all, he doesn't have much closeness with the Su family. However, he couldn't live without blood. What if he was injured again one day, or even if he suddenly became hungry one day, could he really run madly into the streets and hunt down living people in the end? The evening flight is a little faster now. If we can't get plasma anymore, we will really have to go to Chengdu empty-handed. The black cat suddenly looked at Subai, then jumped off the bench in an aloof manner and started walking towards the east gate of the park. Subai could only continue to follow. After leaving the park, they walked not long after crossing a road. Black Cat entered a community directly. This was a very ordinary community. Subai followed Black Cat in. Black Cat walked directly into the entrance of a unit building, and then looked at Subai at the elevator entrance. Subai came over and the Black Cat's paw drawed a 7 on the ground. Subai pressed the elevator button. After entering the elevator, he pressed the 7th floor button. After the elevator door opened, the Black Cat took the initiative to walk out again. Subai continued to follow behind. Soon, the Black Cat stopped in front of a door. Subai pointed at the door, but Black Cat didn't respond and continued to maintain his aloof manner. Dong dong dong. Subai had no choice but to knock on the door because the doorbell of this house was broken. Who? Me, Subai responded vaguely. Squeak. The door opened, and it was a woman. She was wearing an apron, holding a spatula in her hand, and smelled of perfume. She was short, a little plump, and very homely, but she could not hide her aura of charm. Who are you? The woman glanced at Subai and asked. I. Subai was about to make an excuse, but at this moment, Ji Xiang suddenly called out again. Meow. After the cat meowed, Subai was shocked to find that the spatula in front of him turned into a kitchen knife dripping with blood, and the apron turned into a coat full of dirt and blood. The woman's body was also covered with blood. Blood, the woman's eyes were bulging high, with 2 big blood bags swollen inside. Her face was full of pits and blood holes, and half of the tongue in her mouth was hanging out. In an instant, a strong and disgusting smell of blood came over. So, caught off guard. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 34. The woman doesn't know Subai. No. She could not even be considered a human being. As for what she was, Subai didn't know. The only clear thing was that the auspicious meow made her reveal her true form. At this time, Subai had no time to sigh again about the ability of this black cat called Auspicious, nor did he have time to think about the mystery of the dark lychee who could directly add his own WeChat account through the Terror Broadcast public WeChat account. Anyone looking at this image in front of them would probably subconsciously ignore everything else. Hey, are you Xiao Zhang? Our Lao Wang often mentions you. Are you here to visit? Come on in and sit down. Our Lao Wang just went on a business trip and won't be back this week. Since you are here, my sister-in-law must at least give you something. Take care of a meal. The woman even glanced at Subai, which was obviously teasing and seductive, just like the red apricot that drove to the wall of the neighbor's house next door. She even licked her lips. That gesture, the meaning is already obvious. The man is in love with his concubine. Dry wood and strong fire. Bring it on. However, the woman doesn't seem to know that her disguise has been completely revealed after that auspicious cry. At this time, she is a terrifying image, ogling again, making charming gestures, and deliberately teasing. With her secret glances, it is estimated that no matter how hungry a man is, he will not have the slightest bit of that kind of physical impulse when facing her. Come on, why are you standing there? Come in, sister-in-law, my meal is almost ready. Subai looked at Ji Xiang and then at the woman. What on earth did the cat bring him here? What the hell is this woman? At this time, Subai observed that the woman's entire body was completely flush with the boundary of the door. Not even a hair extended out at all. This meant that this woman could not go out of this door. Not even a hair can touch the door. At this moment, Jixiang directly slipped through the crack in the door and entered the house. Subai looked at the black cat, then at the frightened-looking woman, and nodded. In fact, from beginning to end, Subai's expression did not show any surprise at this woman. He controlled well done. Then, please trouble me, sister-in-law. Subai said hello casually, and walked in after the woman opened the door. As soon as she entered the house, the woman instantly returned to normal, and the house was very clean. The woman turned into that mature woman who was about 40 years old, with a bit of beauty and charm, and she was the kind of MILF. Old type. In this society, it is difficult to agree with others. There are indeed many men who like this kind of older women, and women of this age are generally experienced, live well, and can take care of others, especially in bed. Sit on the sofa for a while, and my sister-in-law will go to the kitchen to prepare the remaining dishes. Then I'll trouble my sister-in-law. Subai smiled and nodded, then sat down on the sofa in the living room. The woman also walked into the kitchen, deliberately twisting her plump and round buttocks in front of Subai. After a while, the sound of banging pots and pans came from the kitchen. Jixiang also jumped on the sofa and squatted next to Subai. From the beginning to the end, the woman seemed to only notice herself and did not notice that a black cat came into the house. Subai looked at Jixiang. Could it be that Jixiang was completely invisible in that woman's eyes? Jixiang also turned his head at this time, looked at Subai, then stretched out his paw and touched Subai's shirt. There was a pocket there, and there was a ring. It was the ring left by Lu He. Subai understood and took out the ring. Subai has been troubled by the side effects of his vampire constitution these days, and Subai has no time to study this ring, but judging from the black cat's intention, should he wear it now? Does it have any special effects? Anyway, Subai has been a little numb by the cat's various performances. At this time, he doesn't care whether the ring will have any other effects on him after wearing it. Let's put it on first. As soon as the ring was put on, Subai felt as if an icy cold wave had hit his whole body, and he couldn't help but shiver. Immediately afterwards, Subai was shocked to find that the sofa under him had become extremely decayed, and there were even many cockroaches crawling on it. Occasionally, he could see groups of flesh maggots crawling around. In the room, the previous cleanliness was gone, leaving only blood stains everywhere. The floor, ceiling, refrigerator, TV, etc. were all covered in jet black blood. Here, instead of being an ordinary apartment in a community, it is simply a haunted house and a purgatory. Come on, the soup is almost ready, drink a glass of water first. The woman came over with a glass of water. At this time, because of the ring, the woman looked like the auspicious cat meowing before. The rotten flesh on her body kept following her steps. He was shaking, and there were dense blood holes on his arms, making his scalp numb. Drink water and don't be polite to me. The woman handed the water glass to Subai enthusiastically. Subai looked at the water glass in front of him. Wherever there was any clear water in it, it was filled with squirming meat maggots and even earthworms. In short, it was as disgusting as possible. But at this time, Subai still held it in and reached out to catch the cup. Ding dong! One of the woman's eyeballs fell out of its socket and fell into the water glass, but she was still staring at Subai. Drink, you must be thirsty. This scene, this kind of sensory visual stimulation, would probably make ordinary people scared. At this time, Subai suddenly felt like an ordinary person, because he felt fear, a big fear. No, I'm not thirsty. I just drank a bottle of drink down there and my stomach is still bloated. Oh, okay, let's eat later. I'll go check out the soup. The woman turned around and went to the kitchen. The sound of pots and pans continued to come from the kitchen, but something was wrong. At this time, the eyes in the cup in Subai's hand were still looking at him with a sinister look. Subai glanced at Ji Xiang from the corner of his eye. He really wanted to pour all the water on the cat. Sister, let me help. Subai stood up and walked to the kitchen. Hey, no need. Sister can do it alone. You can take a shower first and we can have a good chat after dinner. The woman's voice had a hint of bewitchment, and it was obvious that she was deliberately inducing people to think about that kind of thing. However, Subai still walked into the kitchen. The woman in the kitchen was really making soup. Something was being cooked in a large pressure cooker. It was filled with smoke. Subai took a closer look and saw clearly that there was actually a baby stewed inside. The baby's head had been it was stewed very well, and there was a charming meat aroma permeating it. Although Subai found it disgusting, the smell of meat was indeed very charming. And the woman was sitting on the ground, holding a large kitchen knife in her hand and sharpening it. As if she noticed that Subai was coming, the woman raised her head. I told you to take a shower first. Sister can do it by herself. Alas, you young people still know how to care about others. My Lao Wang has never entered the kitchen. The woman seemed to have sharpened the knife. She stood up, took out a big spoon, filled some soup from the pressure cooker, put it in her mouth to taste, and then smiled. The taste is just right and fresh. As she spoke, the woman began to serve soup, holding a large bowl. Subai clenched and released his right fist, but decided not to act rashly, walked out of the kitchen and returned to the living room. Jixiang was still sitting on the sofa, continuing to act aloof. Subai looked around and found something red under the TV cabinet. He walked over, opened the door of the small glass cabinet, and took out a red box. When he opened the box, there were more than a dozen vermilion statuettes inside. They are jelly bean-like particles. The moment he opened the box, a strong and pure smell of blood immediately hit his nostrils. Even in this situation, Subai could not help but reveal a hint of intoxication. What a sweet taste of blood! What a pure taste of blood! As a vampire, Subai is now particularly sensitive to blood. However, he suddenly found that there was no movement in the kitchen. Subai suddenly broke away from his original fascination with blood. He raised his head and saw a woman with a sinister face putting her face next to his shoulder. When he turned his head, the woman also turned her head. The two faced each other. Looking at. He. The woman sneered, with a strange smile on her face. It turns out that you can see my true appearance. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 35. The moment Subai and the woman looked at each other, the kitchen knife in the woman's hand had already been swung and struck. Subai's body turned to one side, and he almost jumped out on the spot. The woman's kitchen knife swept Subai's clothes, making a crisp sound, and the airflow from the kitchen knife hit Subai. There was actually a sharp tingling feeling on the white skin. You can actually see what I really look like. The woman let out another incredible scream, but the kitchen knife was not idle, but continued to chop at Subai. Subai picked up a vase on the cabinet next to him and found that the vase was filled with children's feet, which made the vase appear extra heavy. Subai, who originally wanted to pick up the vase and throw it at it, was unable to throw the vase due to lack of preparation. However, the woman's kitchen knife had already fallen down again. Subai had no choice but to raise the vase to face the kitchen knife. There was a clang sound, and Subai was shocked that the vase in his hand actually resisted the woman's kitchen knife. The woman's kitchen knife actually penetrated into the vase and got stuck. This completely went against common sense. Wherever he looked, Subai was shocked to find that each foot in the vase was struggling to clamp the kitchen knife. This was the key to the kitchen knife being stuck inside. Subai quickly released the vase, then took a step forward, turned sideways, and kicked the woman hard in the abdomen. With this kick, Subai used all his strength. However, what shocked Subai was that his entire leg actually penetrated the woman's lower abdomen. The rotten flesh on the woman's lower abdomen was completely loosened at this time. Come on, let Subai's legs go straight in. The next moment, the distance between Subai and the woman suddenly narrowed. The woman looked at Subai ferociously, then opened her mouth, revealing a mouthful of smoked yellow teeth with a strong smell of blood, and bit directly towards Subai. Subai suddenly had a very absurd feeling at this time. This scene was so familiar. He seemed to like biting people recently, but he wanted to suck blood, while the other person wanted to eat meat. Both hands tightly grabbed the woman's neck, making it difficult for the woman's mouth to be pressed down. Even if the stench continued to come from her mouth, it was still within the tolerable range for Subai now. Of meow. The auspicious cat meowed, and then began to take care of its hair. It seemed that it didn't care about everything in front of it. It was just a spectator. It brought Subai to this place, but now it seemed to be aloof. The woman was like a madman, twisting her body constantly, and the pieces of flesh and blood on her body kept falling on Subai. Subai continued to resist the opponent's neck with both hands, and then simply he made up his mind, kicked the leg that had pierced the woman's abdomen and pushed it down directly to the ground, then he carried the woman on his shoulders and started running. Ah 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 ah. The woman was clamped by Subai and began to be forced to move. Her strength was actually not very strong. This was how Subai felt now. Although the woman's strength was about the same as that of an adult man, Subai's current physique was indeed much stronger than the average person. He could just rely on his own physique and strength to eat a woman alive. This woman. A paper tiger? At this time, Subai finally regained some clarity in his mind. No wonder this woman wanted to use a method similar to illusions or illusions to deceive and disguise. It turned out that she was not as powerful as he had imagined. What she relies on is to use her illusions to make those men and women indulge in their wildest dreams, relax their vigilance, and then give them a fatal blow when they are most relaxed. But when Subai was on guard early in the morning and her true face was revealed by the auspicious cry, her illusion skills actually didn't have much meaning and effect left, especially when Subai really started to get tough with her. Later, Subai truly realized the reason why Ji Xiang continued to squat on the sofa and take care of his hair with a cold face, because the cat felt that if Subai could not beat this woman in this situation, he would be beaten by this woman. If you kill him, it will be really hopeless. Boom. The woman was knocked directly against the wall by Subai, making a dull sound. Subai's hands changed from holding the woman's neck to squeezing the woman's neck, and his attitude changed from one facing scary things to one the attitude towards facing a slightly tougher opponent. Mentality determines posture. The woman's body was pushed against the wall by Subai, and the woman's head was grabbed by Subai's neck and hit the glass tiles hard, one after another, without stopping at all. The woman's mouth kept making chaotic sounds, but she didn't know the pain or hurt. She still looked at Subai with a strong sense of madness and a stern sneer. Can't kill her? At this time, Subai suddenly discovered that this woman might have been a dead person. She actually had many similarities with herself now, and her strange vitality was extremely strong. It would be nice if I had a chainsaw at this time, but now I can only think about it. At this time, the vase actually rolled to Subai's feet. The large and wide kitchen knife was still fixed on the vase. The kitchen knife was very sharp because the woman had just been sharpening the knife in the toilet. A woman is like a praying mantis, beaten by Subai until her juices splash, but she cannot die. Subai also calmed down, raised the soles of his feet, stepped on the wall, and then exerted force directly with his legs towards the wall. With this reaction force, his whole body was directly separated from the woman, and he rolled on the ground, holding the handle of the kitchen knife in his hand. This time, the kitchen knife was easily pulled out by Subai. The woman regained her freedom because of Subai's departure. She screamed and rushed towards Subai again. Subai held the kitchen knife and stood up with one hand on the ground. He grabbed the woman's shoulder with one hand, barely resisted the woman's momentum, and then picked up the kitchen knife and chopped it on the woman's neck. Puff. Dirty blood spattered and the woman's head fell to the ground. Just when Subai was about to take a breath and thought everything had been solved, the woman's headless body actually hugged Subai from behind. The woman's 10 nails pierced Subai's muscles hard, causing Subai's pain. Bai's whole body trembled. The woman's head rolled to the ground, her hair was lifted, and a single dragon's eye looked at Subai, seeming to be mocking Subai's whims. Subai leaned forward, rolled on the ground, and pressed the woman's headless body under him. Then he tried to break free. At this time, the woman's head jumped up and opened her mouth to bite. Subai! Boom! Subai finally broke free from the restraints of the woman's body, raised his hands, and grabbed the woman's flying head. The woman's teeth kept closing and opening rapidly, with a kind of hysterical madness. Before Subai could get up, the woman's body jumped up and stood up straight like a zombie, with her arms raised flat and white hair already growing on her body. This is about to become a zombie. Subai's eyes widened, and he knew that he could not drag it on any longer. The headless female zombie had jumped over, carrying a gust of wind. She was very fast and fierce. When her feet stepped on the ground, they made a sound similar to that of a hammer. The sound of hitting. Turning around and retreating quickly, Subai managed to dodge a kill from the headless female zombie. However, the female zombie turned her body abruptly in mid-air and faced Subai again. Subai had no choice but to continue to retreat and retreat directly into the kitchen. At this time, the woman's head was still in Subai's hand. Unlike the body's zombification, the woman's headless body had turned into a white-haired rice dumpling, but the woman's face still looked very delicate under the touch of Subai's palm. It's soft, of course, but the feeling of the lumps of rotten meat in your hands is indeed a bit greasy. The big pressure cooker in the kitchen suddenly made a thumping sound at this time. The baby, whose skin was almost boiled until his skin swelled and turned into a giant, actually had his arms on the edge of the high-pressure tube, and his eyes were melted and dead. Deadly facing this way, his body kept struggling in the hot water, making a posture like a baby in a stroller about to be hugged. Of course, Subai knew that he wasn't going for a hug. The feet in the vase had already explained something. When the headless female zombie had arrived at the door of the kitchen, Subai rushed to the pressure cooker without hesitation and put the woman's head in. The giant baby jumped directly on the woman's head and pressed the woman's head under the pressure cooker. Ah! A piercing scream came from the pressure cooker, followed by fishy green juice that kept exploding, and the whole head was melted by the car. At this moment, the white hair on the headless female zombie's body disappeared instantly, and her body was like a deflated balloon, lying softly on the ground, turning into a puddle of completely rotten flesh. Subai wiped his sweat and walked out of the kitchen. Jixiang was still sitting on the sofa. Subai had nothing to say to this cat, but he still picked up the red box from the ground. There were more than a dozen red beads in it. This was more useful and effective than a blood bag, and it was also good for his own health. More attractive. Now, I can go to Chengdu with peace of mind. However, at this moment, there was a knock on the door. Mom, I'm hungry. Open the door. I want to eat. Honey, I'm hungry. Open the door. I want to eat. Sister-in-law, I'm hungry. Open the door. I want to eat. Sister, I'm hungry. Open the door. I want to eat. Outside, there are a group of things similar to that woman, going home at this time. Subai's breathing stagnated. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 36. If there were really a whole family out there who were like this woman, then Subai felt that he wouldn't be able to cope with it at all. However, he didn't panic at this time. On the contrary, he seemed extraordinarily calm. Facing Jixiang, Subai shrugged. I really don't have anything to play anymore. Jixiang jumped down from the sofa leisurely, and then continued to walk to the door in an extremely cold manner. The cat's paws began to draw circles on the ground. Gradually, a light blue light slid across the cat's paws. The ground appears. Then, Ji Xiang took 2 steps back, turned his head, looked at Subai, and then looked at the door in front of him. Subai understood, walked over, stretched out his hand, and held the door handle. At this time, he could no longer hear the shouts outside. He opened the door, and there was no one outside. After walking out, Ji Xiang also followed and stood next to Subai's heels. After closing the door again, Subai let out a heavy breath, and then suddenly felt the world spinning, a feeling of nausea and vomiting coming over him, and he couldn't help but retreated against the wall. The feeling of dizziness went away as quickly as it came. When Subai rubbed his forehead again and raised his head, he found that the door in front of him had disappeared. But there were many wet footprints on the ground, including those of adults, children, and women. It seemed that there were many people standing here knocking on the door just now. Subai looked at the red box in his hand, and then at Ji Xiang. Subai felt that he had nothing to say about this cat. It knew what he needed, so it brought him here, but he didn't. I almost encountered life-threatening danger here. This cat's aloofness was not an act, but a kind of indifference towards life. It completely despises itself from the bottom of its heart and only regards itself as a means of transportation. If Subai had an accident, this cat, no, Dark Lychee should be able to find another person to send it back to CD. At this time, a voice request came from Subai's mobile phone. It came from WeChat. Subai took out his mobile phone, looked at the other party's name, and clicked agree. Jixiang has already helped you get what you want. This is considered as your reward for helping me bring Jixiang back, so hurry up. Li Ji's speech was not very fast, but he had the attitude of a superior who despised everything, which made Subai very uncomfortable. He hung up the call, didn't speak, put the phone back in his pocket, and walked down the stairs. Jixiang followed behind, its black hair blending harmoniously with the surrounding darkness, and its amber-like eyes shone with a strange brilliance. Subai returned to his car. The wounds on his body had actually healed, and he seemed a little weak now, but fortunately he was not in a state where he needed human blood, just like he had a slight cold. After wiping his body with a wet wipe, Subai put on a set of clothes he bought during the day, and then drove directly to the airport. At this time, it was not long before the plane took off. Counting the time on the road, just about the same. Jixiang continued to squat in the passenger seat quietly, as steady as a rock. When he arrived at the airport, Subai parked the car directly, and then sent a message to the car rental company asking them to come here to pick up the car in 2 days. The deposit given by Subai was regarded as labor fee. When entering the airport, Jixiang followed Subai, but the security personnel at the airport gate seemed to not see Jixiang at all. The black cat seemed to be in a deserted place. Seeing this scene, Subai shook his head, bought another ticket, put the seat next to his own seat when checking in, and then went through the security check to wait for the flight. When they boarded the plane, Jixiang still followed Subai. After Subai sat down, Jixiang sat down next to Subai. Neither the passers-by nor the stewardess saw the cat. When the plane took off, Subai deliberately glanced at Jixiang from the corner of his eye. Since this cat was so powerful, would there be any additional benefits if he peeled off its skin or sucked its blood? As if sensing something, Ji Xiang glanced at Subai coldly. The person and the cat looked at each other for a moment and then moved away together. Subai closed his eyes, put down his position, lay down on the seat, and began to rest. When the stewardess started telling her to fasten her seat belts and open the windows one by one, Subai slowly woke up. Unknowingly, she had been asleep for several hours. At this time, the plane was preparing to land. At this time, Jixiang did not continue to sit in his seat aloofly, but lay there and squinted his eyes. He would also be tired. When getting off the plane, Subai picked up his bag, put Jixiang in it, and then got off the plane with the bag on his back. Jixiang didn't resist. Just after leaving the airport, Subai's cell phone rang again. It was a string of addresses, from Lichi. Really thinking of himself as a pet courier, Subai took a taxi outside the airport and went directly to that place. This place is located near the CD 2nd Ring Road, Hongpeilu, Wuhao District. When he arrived at the gate of the community, Subai got out of the car and walked in. When he came to the door of the unit, he waited for a while. When a resident took his card and swiped the access control, he followed him in. Got on the elevator, came to the door of the house, and rang the doorbell. The door is open. Ji Xiang jumped out of Subai's bag and walked in lazily. After the pet was delivered, Subai completed what he promised and turned around to leave. When Subai took the elevator down and walked out of the apartment building, he received this message on WeChat, also from Dark Lizzie. "You are very knowledgeable." Subai replied. "Thanks. Be careful of people like you." Subai frowned. He didn't know what Dark Lizzie's last sentence meant. Be careful of people like me? Are there also radio listeners here for CDs? And the other party is also a vampire? Should you be careful about him? With these things in his mind, Subai stopped a car and reported the address of his parents' house in CD. The car started to drive. Subai took out his cell phone and looked at the message with some confusion. Be careful of people like you. What exactly does that mean? At this time, the taxi driver said, "We're here. Arrive." Subai was a little confused. According to his previous memories, his parents' villa was not so close to the place just now. Could it be that he was distracted because of his heavy thoughts? In fact, it has been a long time. How much? Subai asked. No more money, just solve the case as soon as possible. Now people are so panicked that no one dares to go out. You policeman, ugh. Subai frowned, then seemed to have thought of something, and immediately opened the car door and got out of the car. Subai was shocked to find that he was standing at the door of the police station, and he was actually wearing a police uniform. The surrounding environment has become very backward and outdated, as if it were set in the 1990s in a movie. My third experience mission has begun. A piece of paper landed in front of Subai, a little abrupt, but also a little deliberate. At about 5 p.m. on May 26, 1988, Bai, a 23-year-old female employee of Bian Company, was murdered at her home on Yongfeng Street, Bian District. At 2:50 p.m. on July 27, 1994, she, a 19-year-old female temporary worker of Bian Power Supply Bureau, was killed in her single dormitory. The victim's neck was cut open and there were 36 stab wounds on the upper body. At around 4 p.m. on January 16, 1998, residents discovered that Yang, a 29-year-old woman on Chengli Street in Bian District, had been murdered at her home. Investigation confirmed that Yang was murdered on January 13. It seems likely that someone actually saw the criminal when he committed the crime, or that the criminal was shocked by something. At 5:45 p.m. on January 19, 1998, Deng, a 27-year-old woman who lived on Shuichuan Road, Bian District, was killed at home. At about 6 p.m. on July 30, 1998, the 8-year-old daughter Miao Miao of Zheng, an employee of Bian Power Supply Bureau, was killed at home. This is a very detailed timeline of the crime. After Subai read it, he carefully stuffed the piece of paper into his pocket. Subai took a deep breath and said silently in his heart, "This is an experience mission, this is an experience mission." Gong Zihe said that the experience mission will not be too difficult. Looking at this era and the surrounding environment this time, it is what it was more than 10 years ago. It is absolutely impossible for him to be in the experience mission like last time. The plot connects the characters, so as long as you relax and be careful, it won't be very difficult to get through it. Taking a deep breath, Sudbai walked to the police station guard, where someone was standing guard. After walking in, there was today's newspaper on the desk. Sudbai glanced at the date on the masthead. January 18, 1991. Sudbai suddenly recalled the date of the crime recorded on the note he had just written. That was when the serial murder case reappeared in the Bian area. The murderer committed one case in 1988 and 1994 respectively, and then this year, also on January 16, 1998, a case was also committed, which awakened all the horrifying memories that people in the Bian area had forgotten. Moreover, according to the record on the piece of paper, the murderer will soon commit another murder case on January 19, that is, tomorrow. A 27-year-old young woman named Deng who lives on Shuichuan Road, Bian District will be killed by the murderer at home. Another unsolved case? Like the XX corpse case, an unsolved case that has not been solved for so many years. Sudbai had some impressions of this case, because today in 2016, the era in which he lived, the murderer was still not arrested and was still at large. At this time, a police car drove out of the police station and passed by Sudbai. There were 5 people sitting in the police car, 4 men and 1 woman. Their faces were all solemn. At the same time, as they passed by, Sudbai heard the young man sitting in the passenger seat talking to the person in the driver's seat. Jokingly. This map is really painful to read. It's inconvenient to drive without mobile phone navigation. This group of people in their car are the real listeners of this horrific radio story, and they themselves are the experiencers. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 37. Sudbai pulled down the brim of his police hat a little, subconsciously covering his appearance. However, soon, he smiled. He saw the reflection on the glass window of the guard room, and his own face also changed. Some changes have made him very simple, and the whole person has an aura unique to this era. It seems that these are the settings of the story world this time, so the audience in the previous bus should probably be different from their original appearance, and some changes have been made. What is their mission? Catch the murderer? Stop or catch the real culprit of Bian's serial murder case? If this is the case, it seems that there should be no danger to myself. As long as you try to keep a low profile, try your best to integrate into the society and the environment here, and let yourself be a silent spectator and never leave this police station, you should be able to stay safe until the 5 listeners are finished. Once you complete the task, you can leave. Liu Yang, why are you late? Director Zhou is already waiting there. If you don't go, you might get caught. A policeman patted Sudbai on the shoulder and said to Sudbai. Sudbai turned his head, looked at the policeman, and nodded. We arrived at a conference room. At this time, there were more than 20 police officers sitting inside, including men, women, old and young. The person sitting in the front seat should be Joju. He was holding a cup of tea in his hand. When he saw Sudbai come in and sit down, he coughed. He didn't dwell too much on the matter of being late. Instead, he drank the tea in his mouth. The tea leaves spat out on the ground, the teacup was placed heavily on the table, and he said, Comrades, I believe you all know what the atmosphere is like in our local society now and how the people are in panic all the time. After all, you also have to go home and live with your family. The people's police come from the people, and you are closely related to this society. The murderer who committed 2 crimes and killed 2 people in the past few years has appeared again. He killed another person. But we policemen are unable to do anything about him and have not found any useful clues so far. This has had a great negative impact on the social stability of our local area, and the people live and work in peace and contentment, and has even caused a certain degree of social chaos. Panic. This is our responsibility, this is our mistake, this is our dereliction of duty. Therefore, I am here to announce the establishment of a special investigation team for this case. All of you here are members of the special investigation team. I am the team leader. All of you here should now put down all other things on hand and transfer them here specifically to me. A case comes up. Next, I would like to ask Captain Sheen to explain these three cases in detail. A middle-aged man with a shaggy face stood up, nodded to Director Joe, and nodded to all the colleagues present. He walked to the small blackboard in the conference room, holding some photos in his hand, and began to paste them up one by one. And then begins to tell. The first case occurred. This meeting lasted until noon. During this period, tasks and management responsibilities were also assigned. Bureau Joe replenished tea several times during the tea party. At the end of the meeting, he drank all the tea on the table and picked up his hat. The meeting is over. Sudbai picked up the notebook in front of him, walked out of the conference room, and walked to another large office on this floor. This large office has now been temporarily set up as the office location of the task force, which shows that the higher UPS are going all out to face this case. The determination of the case is very great. Let's go and eat first. Go for meal. The rest of the policemen put down their things and went to eat in twos and threes. Sudbai also put the things on his desk and walked out. The canteen of the police station is not very big, and the big pot dishes will inevitably seem a bit tasteless to people living in that era of the future. Fortunately, Sudbai did not choose these. After eating, he looked around. A colleague from the task force sat down next to him and ate together. The current atmosphere in the task force is a bit depressing. Everyone eats in silence while eating, and no one talks or chats. They just want to have a good meal early and start work. Naturally, the meal was eaten very quickly. Sudbai first returned to his dormitory in the police station. This was a double dormitory, but the bed opposite Sudbai was empty. Obviously, Sudbai was the only one living here for the time being. Sudbai found a diary on the bedside and flipped through it casually. Now, Sudbai generally has a clearer understanding of his identity. He graduated from the police academy. During this period, police academy graduates were basically equivalent to a golden phoenix when they landed in the local area. As long as they did not commit too many crimes, if you continue to make mistakes, at least your future will be guaranteed. I come from a single-parent family. My mother died young and I have a father at home. However, my father has already remarried. I usually have little contact with my father's family, so I always stay at the police station for food and accommodation. What made Sudbai smile a little was that he actually had a girlfriend. However, the relationship between the two people should only be very weak, and they are in the beginning stage of love. Sudbai shook his head. The story world this time was indeed quite interesting. It basically changed his identity completely. Why is this? Is it just to prevent myself, the experiencer, from becoming a pig for those real listeners again? Just a bug fix? Feeling sleepy, Sudbai picked up a thermos bottle in the dormitory and poured himself a glass of water. He picked it up and took a few sips, then walked out of the dormitory with the cup and walked towards the building where the task force was located. Sudbai came relatively early. There were only 3 or 4 people from the task force in the office at this time. When Sudbai came in, everyone looked at each other and nodded as a greeting, and then continued to do what they were doing. Most of the members of the task force followed the tasks assigned during the morning meeting and went out to work after lunch. Sudbai was assigned to the task group for information collection. At this time, computer office work was not really popular, and there were not even many computers in the bureau. Some case materials and related visit information needed to be sorted manually, which was also a huge workload. Sudbai walked to his desk first, but his eyes suddenly froze. He put his notebook on the table before eating, but Sudbai had a habit of putting the pen upside down on the notebook. But now, his pen as it fell to the side. Picking up his notebook, Sudbai flipped through it and found obvious signs of flipping and new creases on several pieces of paper. Sudbai's certain convenient habits can indeed be close to a kind of paranoia. For example, when it comes to books and notebooks, he will never wrinkle them on weekdays. It's not that he can't bear to part with them, it's just a style he has developed since he was a child. Obviously, someone came here specifically to look through his notebook, and this notebook only recorded the content of the morning meeting and some key notes. Sudbai left his desk again and found several tables. The notebooks on them seemed to have been turned over. One notebook seemed to be in a hurry. After flipping through it, it was stuffed directly into the folder, crookedly. And the folders and other information on the table are placed neatly, which shows that the owner of the desk also has good working habits. If he had placed them, he would never have stuffed them in so casually. Sudbai took out the notebook and flipped through it, with a look of surprise on his face. There wasn't a lot of content about today's meeting in this notebook. Of course, it didn't have a lot of words, but the content was summarized very concisely. There are circles after circles on it, with marks and arrows, written in a flying style, and with lots of scribbles. It is obvious that the owner of this notebook was thinking deeply during the meeting. Sudbai turned to the front again. The notebooks were all used. The same was true for Sudbai's notebook. It had been used by the policeman named Liu Yang. In other words, Sudbai was now Liu Yang. However, the contents in the front of this notebook are all very meticulous. The records are very dense but also very neat. It can be seen that the user is a dogmatist. Therefore, the contents of the previous notes are different from those at today's meeting. The content of the notes has a very strong sense of contradiction. Sudbai suddenly seemed to realize something, but then he looked at his colleagues who were still concentrating on sorting out information with their backs to him. Am I not the only one experiencing this time? Or is he a listener? So, who is the person who looks through everyone's notebooks for clues to their identity? What's his purpose? Note. Audience, those who have experienced 3 experience missions and started to experience the world of real horror radio stories. Audiences are divided into newcomers and veterans according to the number of times they have experienced the story. Experiencer, those who are still in the first 3 experience missions. If they are lucky enough to obtain story points, they will not be able to redeem them normally, unless they encounter something that ignores the redemption rules, such as Sudbai's broken vampire blood. The experiencer is the reserve of the audience, which has been described in the previous article. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 38. For some reason, Sudbai had a feeling that the person flipping through the notebook was not an audience, but an experiencer like himself. However, Sudbai did not continue to struggle with this matter for too long. He turned over the cover page and saw the name, Wang Hongsheng. He silently wrote down the name in his heart, then took another sip of water and left. In the past, I started sorting out information with the policeman. In fact, Sudbai knew that a new case would happen tomorrow, but he couldn't say or do anything now, at least until he had a thorough understanding of the situation. He still had to do his duty and be his own person. The wisest strategy is not to reveal too many clues and tales about a character, but to hide yourself well first. Sudbai is still yearning for story points. After all, in the last experience mission, Sudbai shared half of the story point contribution alone and exchanged it for the blood of a ruined vampire, which can be regarded as a step forward in strengthening himself. For this kind of thing, it is actually one step first, one step at a time. Get more story points as early as possible, and your future road will be much easier. The most direct expression is that you can live longer in the future. Compiling information was a very tedious task. It was not until night that it finally came to an end. Several police officers were so tired that they sat back at their desks. Subai was the only one left to compile the information. He picked him up and walked to the director's office. Although Director Joe said that he was the leader of the task force, his office was not moved directly. Dong dong dong. Subai knocked on the door. Please come in. Subai opened the door and walked in. Bureau Joe was applying fenjujing, and the pungent smell filled the office. It was obvious that he was also working on this case. Has it been sorted? Yes, Bureau Joe. Well, leave it here. I'll have someone copy it after I read it. Subai didn't have any extra words, he just nodded, put a stack of information on the empty desk next to Director Joe, and was about to leave. However, before leaving, Subai's nose suddenly moved. No, there is more than just the smell of fenjujing in the house. Subai frowned and began to smell carefully. What's wrong? Joe Bureau asked. My legs are a little numb, Subai replied, then staggered a little and walked out of Bureau Joe's office. Director Joe held the teacup and took a sip of tea. Subai stood outside the door with his eyes closed, trying desperately to recall the smell from before. It was a bit refreshing, with a little bit of almond flavor. What could bring these smells? Suddenly, Subai thought of a possibility. He remembered that several chemicals had the smell of bitter almonds. Could it be that Director Joe was tinkering with these things alone in the office, and then used fenju essence to cover them? Smell. This is knowledge learned in high school chemistry. There are several chemical reagents that smell like bitter almonds that can bring fatal toxins to the human body. They are also commonly used in murder cases. Many murderers use those chemical reagents as poisons. To poison. Subai put a hand on his chest, silently calming his breathing. Don't be impulsive. Stay calm. You are just a little police officer now, so you should do what a little police officer should do. Even the task force cannot operate 24 hours a day. When it was time to get off work in the evening, several police officers, including Subai, who had completed the task of sorting and summarizing information, had already left the office area and were considered off-duty. Subai lived in the dormitory of the police station, so he stopped by the cafeteria to get some food and brought it to the dormitory to eat. The dormitory alone seemed a bit deserted, but it was just enough for Subai to take off his daytime disguise and meditate on something while eating. At the beginning of the morning, the police car drove out of the police station. The people in the police car were obviously real listeners. The place they went to, Subai guessed, should be the crime scene of the upcoming case, and they went to make arrangements in advance. Then arrest the murderer. As for the flipped notebook and the person named Wang Hongshen, Subai can only find these clues now, but has no intention of continuing to investigate. At least, his notebook, both in handwriting and style, continues the previous content. Therefore, he should not have exposed any flaws. After finishing the meal, Subai took his tableware to the toilet sink to clean it. The water in the faucet was very strong, and it made a crisp sound when it hit the tableware. Some of the water also splashed on Subai's face. Subai took a deep breath, but at this moment, the sound of a group of people talking came from downstairs. Turning slightly to the side and looking down through the railing of the aisle, Subai saw 4 men and 1 woman walking towards here. These are the 5 policemen who drove out during the day. The 5 people seemed to be discussing something intensely. Subai could only vaguely hear a few words, such as consequences, extreme, change, etc. Subai speculated that they were discussing the case that was about to happen tomorrow. Well, they should know the exact location, and time of tomorrow's case, but they are arguing about whether they and others should make arrangements in advance. Some people think that too much advance arrangements will alert the snake, while some people think that if there are not many arrangements, make some preparations. If the murderer is allowed to leave, the consequences will become a bit tricky. At this time, Subai suddenly envied them. They could talk about these things openly. People who didn't know it thought they were just discussing cases, but Subai knew clearly that they were discussing cases that had not happened yet. The audience should be able to know the mission in advance, and even get some information about the next story world from the public account in advance, but Subai himself, as an experiencer, had a blank look. Of course, because of this, although he had avoided most of the dangers, Subai still instinctively hated this muddled feeling. After the dishes were washed, Subai didn't stay here too long and returned to his dormitory with the dishes. Lying on the bed, just about to take a nap, there was a knock on the door from outside. Lu Yang, can you do me a favor? This is a woman's voice. Subai frowned slightly. He really didn't want to have too much communication and contact with the other people in this story. After all, he was just a fake. But the other party obviously knew that he was in the dormitory, and it would be a bit abnormal if he didn't open the door. He got up, walked to the door, and opened it. There was a female police officer standing outside. She was not very pretty, a little fat, and had a lot of acne on her face. Lu Yang, there's no food in the cafeteria. Please cook me some instant noodles. You have a gas stove here. I'm going to take a shower first. I'll be back in 10 minutes. I'll take a shower. Wait for me. The female police officer stuffed 2 bags of instant noodles and 2 eggs into Subai's hands, then turned around and left carrying a plastic bag, probably going to the public bathroom. Subai had read Lu Yang's diary before. It contained feelings, impulses, and admiration for love, but there were no photos or anything like that. But at this time, Subai felt helpless and touched his forehead. Could it be that Lu Yang's lover is that little chubby girl just now? But even if it's not her, it still shows that the relationship between the two should be good. Subai added water to the small pot and turned on the gas stove. After the water boiled, he put the instant noodles in, then cracked the eggs in. When it was about time, he used one of his big guns to scoop out the instant noodles. And then placed it on the small table. He sat on the edge of the bed and touched it. There was no smoke around. Obviously Lu Yang did not smoke. However, after waiting for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, or even 30 minutes, the fat girl still did not come back. The instant noodles in the bowl have absorbed enough soup water and become very thick and swollen. Subai was a little puzzled. Taking a bath shouldn't be so slow, and since she had asked herself to cook instant noodles and she hadn't eaten dinner, she should be more agile. After pushing open the dormitory door, Subai stood in the corridor, with the balcony below. Subai suddenly noticed that police officers one after another were running hurriedly in one direction. Some of them seemed to have taken a rest and were not even wearing police uniforms. What's going on? Subai shouted down. I said, Xiaolu, why are you still standing there stupidly? Something happened to your chore. It's in the public bathroom. Come and have a look with me. Subai's heart skipped a beat, and without closing the dormitory door, he rushed down the stairs and ran to the public bathroom with the middle-aged policeman who had just answered him. At this time, there were dozens of police officers surrounding the public bathroom, and everyone consciously maintained order. After all, they were not ordinary people watching the excitement. A stretcher carrying a partially covered body, covered with clothes, was placed at the door of the public bathroom. The scene was a bit lonely. Subai pushed away the person in front of him, and when he saw the female corpse, wasn't it the fat policeman who just told him to cook instant noodles and wait until he came back from the shower? When some police officers around saw Subai coming, they silently patted Subai on the shoulder and cast concerned glances. That's right, she is Lu Yang's girlfriend, which is also my girlfriend. Subai took a deep breath, and his eyes began to force themselves to moisten. Then, with an expression of disbelief on his face, he knelt directly on the ground. Seeing Subai like this, a group of people around him immediately came over to comfort him. At this time, the policeman who had been checking the body beside the stretcher said in shock. The neck was cut open and the lower body was violated. This is the murderer's method. You bastard, he actually dared to kill people in the police station. Sudbai lowered his head, as if he didn't hear anything. He was indifferent to the comfort and forgiveness of the people around him, but no useful information escaped Sudbai's ears. At this time, a huge wave was set off in his heart. What's going on? Shouldn't the murder happen tomorrow? Shouldn't the deceased be Deng, a 27-year-old young woman who lives on Shuichuan Road, be in district? Why has it become like this? At this time, the 5 policemen, 4 men and 1 woman, also rushed over. The 5 people's faces were obviously very tired. They were obviously very busy and tired during the day. But when they pushed through the crowd and walked in and saw the body, the 5 people, there was also a look of complete disbelief on his face. The plot, why has it changed, how is it possible? Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 39. Someone died in the police station and was murdered in this way. The impact is of course self-evident. Not long after, Director Zhou and several other important leaders and second-in-commands from the bureau came here. Director Zhou quickly listened to a policeman's report. The wrinkles on his face seemed to be stacked one on top of another, and he immediately waved. Scolded. Block the news about this matter and keep it strictly confidential. If anyone tells it, the organization will definitely punish him severely. Tonight, everyone, don't sleep. Check it out for me. Check it thoroughly. I don't believe that the murderer has 3 heads and 6 arms. He can kill people in the police station without leaving any traces. Blocking the news is the proper meaning of the question. Now the Bian area is in turmoil. Residents are in panic. Women no longer dare to go out alone at night. If the news about the case in the police station is spread out, it will be detrimental to the entire, a major blow to social order. Even the police are not immune to death in the police station, so what about the ordinary people? Therefore, before the murderer is found and caught, this special murder case must not be spread to society. The specialized autopsy team and other relevant departments immediately began to investigate. Sudbai was persuaded by an older female police officer to stand up, and the other party also sent her back to the dormitory. Everyone in the bureau should know about the romantic relationship between Sudbai and the dead policewoman. Even Bureau Joe comforted Sudbai and asked Sudbai to put down the work at hand and have a good rest. At this time, again, when you go to work, you are prone to making mistakes due to emotional influences. After the other police officers left the dormitory and the dormitory door closed, Sudbai rubbed his face with both hands to relieve his stiffness. I had been pretending to be sad and sorrowful, and I was pretending to be angry and angry. After all, I am not an actor, so I was really tired. Sudbai poured the bowl of instant noodles on the table directly into the trash can, and then he poured himself a glass of water. The water was not very warm, a little cold, but it seemed very suitable for this time. After drinking a glass of water, Sudbai took a few breaths and sat down on the edge of the bed. Immediately afterwards, he seemed to have thought of something, and immediately walked out of his dormitory, went upstairs and stopped at the dormitory at the corner of the stairs. At this time, there were several policemen inside who were rummaging through things. It seemed that it was over. When Sudbai stood at the door, several policemen came out, and one of them patted Sudbai on the shoulder. Sorry, brother. We checked her dormitory and found nothing unusual. It should be that bastard who sneaked into our police station and randomly found targets. As before, there is no purpose. You can go in. Some things will be stolen. Seal it and wait for her family to come and take it away. Of course, you can take some as souvenirs. Several policemen comforted Sudbai and left. Sudbai walked into the dormitory. The dormitory is very simple, just a mattress, quilt, and a small desk. There are not many things on the desk, just a few notebooks and pens. Subai flipped through the notebook, but couldn't find the diary. Apparently, the policewoman who was in a relationship with Liu Yang didn't have the habit of writing a diary. Unlike Liu Yang, who was a bit introverted, he liked to keep a diary. There was indeed nothing special in the dormitory, so Subai sat down at the desk and rubbed his brows. Before, Subai thought that the plot of the story had been changed, but after director Joe issued the gag order, it seemed that things were continuing to develop according to their original trajectory. This serial murder case in Bian area has always been an unsolved case, so it can actually be understood that the murderer also deliberately committed murder in the police station, but the relevant departments forcibly suppressed the news, so the public did not know about it. Later, because of this, the case has been unresolved, so the specific official details have not been disclosed. The murder that occurred in the police station may have been buried in the shadows out of the sight of the world. Can the murderer kill in the police station? Moreover, he was able to kill continuously without leaving any clues. Subai suddenly thought, could the murderer be someone from the police station? If I can think of this myself, I believe there must be others in the police station who will also think of this. However, it is actually very simple to verify whether the plot has changed. Tomorrow, no, it is already late at night. When daytime comes, will the woman named Deng who lives on Chuanshui Road still follow the original development trajectory of the case? Death can determine whether there is a problem with the plot. Suddenly, Subai's eyes were attracted by something. He saw something in a corner under the desk. He lowered his head and picked it up. It was a small piece of broken tape. Tape. Subai looked around again, but found no such thing as a tape recorder. Rubbing his fingers on the tape, Subai narrowed his eyes slightly. This is the police station. This is the story world of a serial murder case. There are many strange whirlpools here, so Subai doesn't know any details. Able to abandon. At this time, Subai suddenly remembered that when he was flipping through Liu Yang's notebook before, he saw several lyrics, which were the lyrics of classic pop songs belonging to this period. Obviously, Liu Yang had always had the habit of listening to music before. During this period, this is not the era in the future, when high-end digital products such as computers and mobile phones have not yet become popular or even disappeared. Ordinary people still rely more on radios and tape recorders to listen to music. And since Liu Yang memorized and copied the lyrics, he obviously had a tape recorder. Otherwise, how could he have memorized the lyrics after listening to them on the radio? However, Subai was sure that there was no such thing as a tape recorder in his dormitory. So, let's speculate again. Since Liu Yang and the dead policewoman were lovers, what would they have done when they were together before? Let's listen to music together. One of the two parties must have a tape recorder, and there must be many tapes of songs. But, it's not in my room, nor in this room. How is that possible? Subai walked out of the dead policewoman's dormitory and started searching in the corridor. This kind of search actually follows a very hit-and-miss nature, but it is by no means aimless. This is the first day into the story, which also means that there are many things and many traces, even if they are considered to have been erased. But probably left a lot of clues. Sure enough, in the corner at the end, Subai saw a trash can. He opened the lid of the trash can, endured the smell of rancid food and rummaged through it. Subai stared at a radio. Next to the radio, there is a white bag with many tapes in it. He took out the radio and the bag containing the tape. Then, when Subai turned around and left, he found a bunch of tapes that had been pulled out from a corner of the trash can. Instinctively, Subai had a hunch that this piece of tape was the most valuable. After picking up the bunch of tapes, Subai lowered his head, carried the tapes and recorder, and walked directly downstairs to his dormitory. After locking the door of the dormitory, Subai took out the tape recorder. He first put a complete tape into it and pressed the play button. Soon, a song by the Little Tigers played. While listening to the song, Subai started to put the tape that was pulled out on his hand back together. This was not difficult. When the song ended, Subai took out the original complete tape and removed the tape inside. Tape strip, wind up the picked up tape strip, then look at it carefully, and put the tape into the tape recorder. There was a hoarse rubbing sound, and then a voice began to appear in the tape recorder. Today is May 15, 1998. He said that he has always had the habit of writing a diary. I also wanted to write a diary, but I didn't want to use pen and paper, so I decided to use a tape recorder. Haha, I must be smart. What came out of the tape recorder was the voice of the dead policewoman. Subai continued to listen attentively. The date would be mentioned before each recording, which conformed to the diary format to a certain extent. He would record it every 2 or 3 days. Finally, when the date came to July 16, 1998, this was the day when the latest case occurred. On July 16, 1998, the murderer appeared again. After several years, he appeared again. Damn it, damn it. Why hasn't this devil gone to hell yet? He actually came out to kill people. This time, I must kill him. He caught him and avenged the woman he killed. She is very positive, very healthy, and very uplifting. She is very similar to how the fat policewoman made Subai feel. She is indeed a very optimistic woman. However, the sound below made Subai's eyes widen suddenly. Haha, you are such a childish woman. If you can catch the murderer, why do you need us to do it? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 41. This voice is the voice of the dead policewoman herself. The same tone, the same timbre, definitely the same person, completely the same person. But the final recording revealed a completely different tone, one of disdain and aloofness, plus what she said. Haha, you are such a naive woman. If you can catch the murderer, why do you want us to do it? She is a person, but not a person, in fact she is another person. This is a very contradictory conclusion, but Subai can understand it because he himself is also a contradictory person, and he is a living example. Subai turned on the recorder a little frightened. Subai took a deep breath, feeling a little dizzy. That female police officer, that Liu Yang's girlfriend, are they also listeners on the radio? And from her tone, it seems that she is not an experiencer, but a real listener. So, why did she come here specifically to find him before she wanted to take a shower, and asked him to help him cook instant noodles? Just because she knew Liu Yang was her boyfriend earlier than she did, just because she wanted to take a bath now and got hungry, so she wanted to find a cheap boyfriend with this status to help cook instant noodles. Yes, is it so boring? Subai rubbed her fingers between her eyebrows. No, there must be something wrong here. The other party is an audience who has passed 3 experience tasks. The other party must have deep meaning when doing this. Her purpose is what? Test yourself, test your identity. But why was she killed again? Was he killed in the same manner as the silver serial murder case? Subai knew that the audience had their own special abilities, at least much more powerful than ordinary people. Moreover, in the story world, they would definitely be very cautious, but even so, she was still killed. Why? Also, the most bizarre thing is that the shock on the faces of the 4 men and 1 woman who looked at the body of the female police officer was really just because they were worried that the plot would be changed. Is it still true? Has a deeper meaning? Is it possible that they actually knew the true identity of this female police officer for a long time, so they were so rude about her death? Sudbai closed his eyes and began to recall the scene when he had just entered the police station gate. There were 4 men and 1 woman in that car. Their expressions and tone of voice seemed a bit exaggerated, even a little exaggerated. The sentence "mobile navigation wait," it seems too arbitrary. Yes, whatever you want. And here, there are actually hidden and lurking listeners. They are there in the open and in the dark. What are they going to do? Fishing. Yes, they want to fish, and the target of their fishing is very likely to be an experiencer like Sudbai. Sudbai rubbed his fingers on his chin. What was going on? Why did the story world originally based on the Bian serial murder case suddenly become so confusing and complicated? Sudbai lay down on the bed. He thought that, as Gong Zihai said, as long as he was not a relevant figure in the plot, there would be basically no danger. But now the problem seems to have arisen, and the aura of danger has become so strong. It seemed like it could drip out. Closing his eyes, Sudbai fell asleep with a heavy thought. At this time, he was not very worried about danger coming close to him while he was sleeping. If there was danger, just come. After a good sleep, he was in good spirits until the next morning, but when he woke up and thought about his situation, Sudbai felt a heavy haze in his heart. Now, the news worth waiting for is whether the next person to die will continue to die according to the original process. Director Joe stopped Sudbai's work and gave Sudbai a short vacation. However, Sudbai was not willing to stay in his dormitory forever. Before, he felt that as long as he acted well, he could at least avoid danger. Now it seems a bit naive. He left the dormitory and even walked out of the relatively safe police station. Of course, the deaths of the female police officer and the female audience member actually showed that the police station was not as safe as imagined. At the bulletin board, Sudbai stopped and took a look. There were photos and names of the policemen. Sudbai focused on looking for Wang Hongsheng and found that Wang Hongsheng was a handsome-looking man. Of course, did his true appearance match that of Wang Hongsheng? It's unknown if his photo is the same now. Sudbai stopped a motorcycle at the door of the police station and told him a location. The motorcycle started and took Sudbai to the entrance of a street. After paying the bill, Sudbai sat down in a noodle shop on the roadside. Ordering a bowl of noodles and a bowl of mung bean soup, while waiting, Sudbai's eyes wandered around a residential house across the street. Sudbai, who originally planned to find out the situation first before speaking, now came to the place where the next murder was about to occur. Soon, the noodles came. Sudbai nodded to the boss, then took out the disposable chopsticks, spread them out, added some chili pepper and vinegar to the noodles, and stirred them up. Coincidentally, across the road, 2 people came over, 2 men. Sudbai's eyes were suddenly attracted, because one of the people, coincidentally, turned out to be Wang Hongsheng. Wang Hongsheng and another plainclothes policeman also walked into this noodle shop. Because Sudbai was sitting on the other side, and after finding an acquaintance, Sudbai subconsciously turned around again, so the 2 of them were no one noticed Sudbai's whereabouts and sat down behind Sudbai. The 2 of them have quite cheerful personalities, because they started bragging as soon as they sat down. The wild blowing caused the other customers in the noodle shop to look at each other frequently. Sudbai continued to eat the noodles slowly, very calmly. In fact, this was also a way for plainclothes police to hide themselves. After all, not all plainclothes policemen were like in the Hong Kong police and gangster TV series, wearing a headset and taking a picture. The newspaper can just sit there. Sometimes, this kind of publicity is also a good way to hide yourself. At this time, the black and white TV in the noodle shop was playing a program from CCTV. The host in the program was telling an inspirational story with the theme of persistence, which was very vivid and touching. At this time, Wang Hongsheng pointed at the TV and smiled. What is this? Is this called persistence? Haha, one time I went swimming in the sea and suddenly my hands and feet cramped. What should I do? I was about to drown. I was so scared at the time. Hey, you been to the beach? A plainclothes policeman next to him knew that he was bragging, but he also knew how to cooperate. Yes, are your hands and feet cramped? I just relied on my own to stir and swim back to the shore. What did this rely on? It relied on a spirit of persistence. Puff. 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 The guests at several tables around burst out laughing when they heard this, and several lesbians also covered their mouths and couldn't stop laughing. The policeman next to Wang Hongsheng shook his head at this time. What does this mean? I'll tell you something. You say. I once went to the beach to swim, and by chance, my hands and feet were cramped. I just relied on continuous ejaculation and reverse thrust to get to the shore. This is because of a spirit of perseverance. You're so wrong. I went swimming a while ago, and my hands and feet cramped again. But this time I didn't insist anymore. Instead, I threw my out and hung it on the tree on the shore. Dragged it ashore. Even Subai couldn't help laughing when he heard this. These two people were indeed able to tell dirty jokes. However, suddenly, Subai felt a figure suddenly disappear into the alley in front of him. There is a situation. Wang Ongshen's eyes narrowed, but he made no move and continued to brag to the plainclothes policeman next to him. Subai stood up, looked at the price list on the sign, put the money on the table, and walked over. If you don't enter the tiger's den, you won't get the cub. At this time, it's a knife to hide the turtle's head, and it's a knife to get out. Subai is still willing to choose the former. The dangerous atmosphere is getting closer and closer to him. I don't know what's going on in this story world. Experience the person doesn't feel any sense of security at all. On one side of the alley, turn in, which is the area where the murder happened. Subai saw a dent in a trash can in the corner. It was obvious that the other party climbed over the wall by stepping on the trash can. Subai pursed his lips, stepped forward, stepped on the trash can to gain strength, grabbed the wall with both hands and climbed directly in. After going down, there was a residential house inside. Subai just stood up and quickly backed away, hiding under the corner of the wall. He did not rush to follow the traces of the people in front of him and explore inside. Then, about 10 seconds later, a tall figure jumped down from there. The next moment, Subai rushed forward, jumped up, flew into the air, and hit the opponent's neck with an elbow. Subai is not here to catch the murderer. The purpose of his coming here. It was not for the murderer. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 42. Subai's elbow attack contained his entire strength. This was not a competition or a sparring match, but a complete fight to the death as soon as he struck. However, the other party's reaction was beyond Subai's expectation. Subai only saw the other party's ears suddenly trembling, and then the whole person suddenly turned sideways, twisted his waist, and swept one leg directly behind him. Coming like the wind. The sole of his foot kicked Subai directly in the lower abdomen. Subai suddenly felt as if his internal organs had been shaken out of position. However, he was not kicked away. Instead, he pressed down with one hand and firmly grasped the opponent's thigh. He completely swallowed up the opponent's leg, and then the other hand's elbow hit the opponent as originally expected. It was just because of the opponent's early movement that the elbow hit did not hit the opponent's neck. It hit the opponent's shoulder. Boom. Boom. The next moment, both men fell to the ground. Wang Hongsheng took a breath of cold air, rubbed his shoulder with one hand and stood up staggeringly with the other hand on the ground, a look of solemnity and coldness on his face. A wisp of blood overflowed from the corner of Subai's mouth, but he slowly stood up. His breathing was a little short, but his whole body was not knocked out by Wang Ongshen's kick. If an ordinary person was kicked so firmly, he would probably have to lie in bed for a long time, but Subai was different. His physique was somewhere between that of a human and a vampire, and his body functions and organ operation were also a bit strange. He has become more non-human, so after receiving such a kick, the damage suffered is lighter than that of ordinary people. Haha, I didn't expect that there is a hidden audience here. Wang Hongsheng loosened his neck, then crossed his feet, pushed out his palms, and made a starting pose. At first glance, it was a standard Lianjiazi. It could be seen from his tone that he regarded Subai as he was an audience member, and it was obvious that he seemed to have extremely malicious intentions towards the audience. Subai is not a martial arts practitioner, but he can generally see some skills. In recent years, the Wing Chun series of literary and artistic works have been very popular, and this boxing style often appears on TV and posters. Subai wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, looked at Wang Hongsheng, and smiled. I am the experiencer. This joke is not funny at all. How can an experiencer who cannot redeem things, who basically cannot earn story points, turn into an almost non-human body? Only listeners who have completed 3 experience missions, accumulated a certain amount of story points, and obtained redemption rights can transform their bodies and strengthen their physiques. Before, Wang Hongsheng knew the strength of his kick. It was absolutely impossible for ordinary people to eat his kick alive and then stand up immediately like a normal person. Wang Hongsheng stopped talking nonsense and rushed forward again. His skills were indeed fierce. Subai had learned some fighting skills before, but they couldn't compare with Wang Hongsheng. He was a bit out of his depth. But fortunately, Subai's current sensitivity and reaction ability were better than those of Wang Hongsheng. Ordinary people are much stronger. Even though he took the initiative to retreat, Wang Hongsheng failed to really grasp Subai's weak spot several times. Of course, he was beaten by many punches and kicks. Fortunately, although Subai was not a skinny person now, the flesh is rough and thick, but the ability to withstand damage is indeed much higher than that of ordinary people, so it can survive for the time being. In fact, both men had guns on their waists, but they both tacitly agreed not to draw their guns. Who are you? At this time, on the balcony of the second floor, a woman came out, holding a plastic basin in her hand. There were some clothes that had just been taken out of the washing machine, and she planned to dry them. Wang Hongsheng and Subai stopped instantly, and their eyes fell on the woman. I'm going to call the police. The woman put down these harsh words and walked into the house. She didn't know whether she was really calling the police or just trying to scare people. Of course, the former was very likely. After all, with the reoccurrence of the Bian serial murder case, the public was on alert. And the awareness of prevention is already in a tight state, and it is not an exaggeration to say that everyone is at war. However, a message crazily emerged in Subai and Wang Hongsheng's minds, which was something they remembered. At 5:45 p.m. on January 19, 1998, a 27-year-old female named Deng, who lived on Shuichuan Road, Bian District, was killed at home. This woman, the woman who just came out and went in, is the deceased. Are you really an experiencer? Wang Hongsheng asked. It's guaranteed to be replaced if it's fake, Subai replied. Not even a minute after the woman entered, a clang noise suddenly came from inside. The pupils of Subai and Wang Hongsheng shrank suddenly. Wang Hongsheng ran forward without saying a word, then stepped on the edge of the wall with one leg and jumped up. He grabbed the lower edge of the balcony with both hands, and then used his arm strength to lift the whole person up. After all, it was a Lianjiazi. This kind of kung fu was indeed not something ordinary people could do. Subai did not choose to follow Wang Hongsheng to the balcony. He chose to go around to the back door of the house, intending to enter from there, which was considered a kind of door blocking. Pushing the door open, there was a staircase with high brightness. Subai quickly went upstairs and turned a corner, which was the living room. At this time, Wang Hongsheng was already standing in the living room, lying on the sofa in the living room. Looking at a woman, the woman is dead. The neck was cut open, the long skirt worn at home was torn, and the lower part was exposed, and there was a thick white liquid with a seafood smell left on it. The design of this residential house is different from that of the future. It is a bit like making room for the sake of making room. The living room has only one entrance and exit, which is the door facing the exit. Exiting the door is the staircase that Subai came up. Wang Hongsheng glanced at Subai, and Subai also glanced at Wang Hongsheng. The two of them were fighting to the death before, but now they both knew that they had to let it go temporarily. Subai had already had an idea in his mind. In this story world, is it possible to experience the two camps of readers and listeners have been separated, and the two sides have begun a confrontation, even a fight with each other? The audience deliberately showed off, and even concealed their identities to conduct unannounced visits to find the experiencers, and the experiencers were also making their own fierce counterattacks. The death of the policewoman was a pattern of counterattacks. However, it was already a fixed mindset that the audience must be stronger than the experiencers. However, after seeing Wang Ongshen's skills, Subai suddenly realized a problem, that is, if the experiencers who came in were all very powerful, Subai suddenly realized a problem. Strong, in the real world, are ruthless, and they are all elites among people. So, when they face the audience who are not very high level and may only be considered very low level, there does not seem to be the kind of gap in strength that they take for granted. Wang Hongsheng made a gesture to Subai, which meant that he was going to check the kitchen and bathroom, and Subai was going to check the two bedrooms. Subai nodded. The two people walked very slowly, as if they were worried about the other party's sudden attack. When the distance between the two parties was far enough, the two people speeded up. Subai entered the master bedroom. The furnishings in the master bedroom were a bit simple. There was only one bed, and there was not even a quilt on the bed. The information stated that the deceased Deng was called a young woman, which meant that Deng was not married yet and might be alone. Living here is probably why she was met with a killer. The bed in the master bedroom was very low, and there was no way to hide anyone underneath it. Subai turned around and went to the side bed. The atmosphere of life in the side bed was much richer. There were quilts on the bed and a mat on the floor. Clothes, some things, and cosmetics are also everywhere. Deng probably prefers the quietness of lying on his side, so he chose to rest here. Subai first walked past the bed and found nothing unusual. Then he bent down and looked under the bed. There was nothing unusual, and there was nothing unusual over the dressing table. When doing these inspections, Subai breathed very tightly. Having learned from the paper man, he now has a natural caution towards the boss in the story. When Subai silently pulled up the curtains, a ray of sunlight shone in, and then, a slight breathing sound came. Subai's heart suddenly agitated. Behind yourself. Through the glass of the window, Subai could see the wardrobe on the other side of the bed behind him, where the sound of breathing just came from there. Yes, it's the sound of breathing, definitely the sound of breathing. That guy, that murderer, is hiding in the closet. That was the most suitable place for hiding people, and it was also a place Subai deliberately didn't check before. At this time, Subai silently walked out of the side bed and returned to the living room, and Wang Hongsheng just came out. No, Wang Hongsheng said. Me neither, Subai replied. So, nothing was found this time. Wang Hongsheng looked at the corpse. No, at least one thing is certain, Subai said. What's up? The murderer has a problem with premature ejaculation. From the time the woman left the balcony and entered the house to when Subai and Wang Hongsheng came in, it took less than 2 minutes. The murderer not only killed someone, but also shot him. It was really fast. Wang Hongsheng nodded, then walked over. You go to my side to check, and I'll go to your side to check again. Exchange inspection? Good. Subai nodded and walked to the bathroom. Wang Hongsheng walked into the master bedroom. He found nothing in the master bedroom. Then, he turned into the side sleeper. When Wang Hongsheng just walked into the side sleeper, Su Bai's shout suddenly came. We found him in the closet in the bedroom. You need to catch him quickly. Don't let him escape. Wang Hongsheng.